He said she was just his best friend. And for the longest time, I believed him. Because when you love someone, really love them, you don't count how many times they smile at their phone. You don't question why they're coming home a little later each night. You just tell yourself it's fine. That love, if it's real, will protect you from whatever you're too scared to see. I used to think love was enough, until love became the very thing that blinded me. Daniel and I met 8 years ago at a friend's wedding. He wasn't the loudest in the room. He was the kind of man who noticed small things. Like the way I kept fidgeting with my dress strap, or how I'd laugh before finishing my sentence. He didn't rush to impress me. He listened. And maybe that's why I fell for him. Because in a world that talks too much, he made silence feel safe. He proposed 2 years later. It wasn't grand. No fireworks or staged photos. Just him on our apartment balcony, holding a small velvet box with trembling hands. And when he asked, "Will you grow old with me?" I said yes without thinking twice. Those first years of marriage were golden. We'd dance in the kitchen to old songs, fall asleep watching movies we never finished, and argue only about who'd do the dishes. He was my home, my person, my calm, until she appeared. Her name was Lena. She worked at his office, bright, beautiful, unapologetically confident. The kind of woman who made everyone feel like they were her favorite person in the room. Daniel introduced her one night at a company dinner. "This is Lena," he said, smiling. "She's my best friend at work." I remember how she hugged me, warm, genuine, and complimented my earrings. She talked fast, laughed louder, and knew everything about Daniel. His favorite coffee, his go-to movie quotes, even his old college nickname. And I laughed along, because what else was I supposed to do? She was his best friend. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, little things began to change. Daniel started checking his phone more often, smiling at texts he didn't show me. He'd say, "Oh, it's just Lena. She's venting about work again." He'd stay late at the office, come home tired, kiss me goodnight with distracted eyes. I told myself it was just stress, deadlines, normal things. But the silence between us started to grow louder. One night, we were sitting on the couch watching a show we used to love. He laughed at a text that came in and I asked, "What's funny?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, nothing. Just Lena being Lena." And I don't know why, but the way he said her name that night, it sounded softer. Warmer. Like it belonged somewhere deep inside him. I didn't want to be that wife, the jealous, paranoid one. So I ignored the little voice in my head that whispered, "Something's wrong." Instead, I smiled, nodded, and asked him if he wanted more popcorn. But that night, when he fell asleep, I looked at his phone on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, glowing faintly in the dark, as if it held a truth I wasn't ready to face. Days turned into weeks, and Lena's name came up in every conversation. She got promoted. She was going through a breakup. She was planning a surprise trip for her mom. It was always Lena this, Lena that. And then one day, he invited her over for dinner. I spent the whole afternoon cooking, trying to make everything perfect. When she arrived, she brought a bottle of wine and hugged me like we'd been friends forever. We sat at the table, the three of us. And for the first time, I watched them together. The way their eyes met before they laughed. How he poured her glass before mine. How easily they finished each other's sentences. It wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't need to say. After dinner, while I cleared the dishes, I heard them talking on the balcony. She said, "You always make me feel safe, Daniel." He laughed, that same laugh that used to belong to me, and said, "You're impossible not to care about." I froze. Every plate in my hand felt heavier, and in that moment, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I was losing him, slowly, to someone who wasn't even trying to take him. Later that night, when she left, he walked back inside smiling. "You two seem like you'd get along," he said. I forced a smile and whispered, "Yeah, maybe." But deep down, something inside me cracked. A soundless, invisible break. The kind that doesn't hurt right away, but echoes for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked past midnight, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe beside me. His arm brushed mine, and I wanted to pull away. Because suddenly, his touch didn't feel like comfort anymore. It felt like confusion. And for the first time in years, I felt alone in our marriage. I used to think the worst kind of heartbreak came from losing someone, but I was wrong. The worst kind comes from watching the person you love slowly drift away, while still sleeping next to you. After that dinner, things changed. Not suddenly, not violently, just quietly, in ways you almost can't explain. Daniel became distant, not cold, just unreachable. He'd be sitting right beside me, yet his mind felt miles away. Sometimes I'd say something and he'd nod, but his eyes would stay glued to his phone. And every time I'd ask who it was, he'd smile that tired smile and say, "Relax, it's Lena. She's just stressing about work." At first I tried to be understanding. She'd been through a breakup, he said. She was struggling, he said. She doesn't have many people to talk to. But somewhere deep down, my instincts whispered, she has you. Weeks went by. I'd find traces of her in small, harmless ways. A hair tie in his car, a coffee mug with her initials from his office, an Instagram story where I'd catch a reflection of him in the corner of her frame. They weren't proof, not really. Just shadows, hints, the kind only someone in love would notice. I started to doubt myself. Was I jealous? Insecure? Was I reading too much into simple things? Daniel made me believe I was. Every time I brought it up, he'd sigh, exhausted. "You're overthinking again, love. Lena's like my sister. How can you not see that? You've been so emotional lately. What's going on with you?" That last one stung, because he said it like my feelings were an inconvenience. There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't shout. It whispers. It makes you question your own reality until you stop trusting your own heartbeat, and I was living in that silence. I began to apologize for things I didn't do, for being too emotional, for asking too many questions, for wanting to feel loved by my own husband. One night, I came home early from a family visit. He didn't hear me come in. The house was dark, except for the faint glow from his phone. I stood there in the hallway, frozen. He was smiling. That same soft, almost shy smile that used to belong to me. Then I heard her voice. Through the speaker, "You make my days better, you know that?" And his voice, quiet, tender. "You make mine easier." He didn't say "I love you," but sometimes love hides in the pauses between words. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I walked upstairs quietly, closed the door, and cried until morning. It wasn't rage that broke me. It was the realization that I'd been replaced, not by someone better, but by someone new. The next day, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I made breakfast. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. And when he kissed my cheek before leaving for work, I almost convinced myself it was still love. But when the door closed behind him, I sat at the table and whispered to myself, "He's not mine anymore." I started keeping track of time. How often he texted her. How many hours he stayed out. It wasn't obsession, it was survival. I needed to know if the man I married still existed somewhere beneath all the distance. He didn't. My friends noticed it too. "You've lost weight," they'd say. Or, "You look tired, is everything okay?" And I'd smile, lie, and tell them, marriage is just hard sometimes, because how do you tell people that your husband is in love with another woman while still coming home to you? There was one night, I'll never forget it. We were at dinner, just the two of us. The waiter brought our meals, the lights were low, soft music playing. And right in the middle of our silence, his phone buzzed. He reached for it instantly. I watched his face light up when he saw the name. Lena. He didn't even hide it anymore. I asked him softly, "Do you ever wonder what it feels like to be me right now?" He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "To sit here watching you smile at another woman's name and pretend it doesn't hurt." He sighed, put the phone face down and said, "You're making this something it's not." That's when I knew. It wasn't about what he was doing. It was about what I was willing to accept. That night, when he fell asleep, I opened his phone. Not to invade his privacy, but to save what was left of my sanity. I didn't find anything obvious at first. Just messages, lighthearted, playful, filled with emojis and inside jokes. But buried between them, I found one that changed everything. Last night felt right. And his reply, "It always does with you." My hands went cold. My vision blurred. The world around me disappeared until all I could hear was my heartbeat. Heavy, uneven, terrified. I sat there, staring at the words that confirmed what my gut had been screaming for months. He wasn't mine anymore. Not his heart. Not his honesty. Just his presence. When I finally looked up, he was awake, watching me. His eyes went from confusion to guilt in a single breath. "You went through my phone?" I wanted to scream. To ask how could you? But the only words that left my lips were, "How long?" He didn't answer. He just buried his face in his hands. And that silence told me everything. He said, "It wasn't supposed to happen." I laughed, a small broken sound. It never is. He reached for me, but I stepped back. His touch felt wrong now, like a stranger's hand pretending to know me. And that was the night our marriage ended. Not legally, not officially, but emotionally. The next morning, he left for work as if nothing happened. No apologies, no tears, no explanations, just routine. And I sat there in our kitchen, staring at the 2 cups of coffee I made, his getting cold, mine untouched, wondering how love could fade so quietly that you don't even hear it leaving. People think betrayal happens in one moment, a kiss, a message, a confession. But in reality, it happens slowly, like a drip that wears away stone. You don't notice the cracks until you're standing in ruins, wondering when the walls fell. After that night, silence became our language. We still lived together, still shared the same space. But everything between us was hollow. He stopped saying good morning. I stopped asking, "When will you be home?" We were 2 ghosts pretending to be married. Sometimes he'd leave early for meetings. Sometimes he'd come back late, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. The scent was subtle, floral, expensive, but unforgettable, and every time I caught it, I felt another piece of me die quietly. I wanted to confront her. To look her in the eye and ask how she could do this. How she could smile at me while holding everything I was losing. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. It wasn't about her. It was about him, the man who let her. One rainy afternoon, I sat in my car outside his office. I told myself I just wanted to see him, to talk. But truthfully, I needed proof my intuition wasn't lying. I waited for hours. Then, just before sunset, I saw them. He walked out laughing, that deep, soft laugh I used to wake up to. She was beside him, umbrella in hand, her fingers brushing his sleeve like she had the right to. And when she turned to him, I saw it, the look of someone who already had what she wanted. I didn't cry. Not then. I just drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. By the time I reached our house, my reflection in the window didn't look like me anymore. It looked like someone who'd been replaced. That night, when he came home, I was waiting. He looked surprised, nervous even. His tie was slightly crooked, his shirt half untucked. "Long day?" I asked softly. He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah." Meetings ran late. I smiled, not because I believed him, but because I finally stopped caring about the lies. "You don't have to explain." "Daniel," he froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you don't owe me pretend stories anymore." He rubbed his face, exhausted, and whispered, "You're being dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. As if my pain was a performance. I stood up and said, "No, I'm just finally seeing things clearly." And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He walked toward me, voice cracking slightly. "Please, don't make this harder than it is." I wanted to laugh, as if I was the one who made this hard, as if his betrayal was just an unfortunate accident. "How long?" I asked again. He hesitated. "Too long." And in that pause, I found my answer. It just happened, he finally said. I didn't mean for it to. You don't accidentally fall in love with someone else, Daniel. He said nothing. And silence again became the only truth we had left. That night, I packed a small bag. Not everything, just enough. A few clothes, my wedding ring, and the photo of us from our honeymoon. The one where we looked happy, before love turned into habit, and habit turned into lies. I didn't leave right away. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at him as he slept. He looked peaceful, like a man who'd already made peace with losing me, and that realization broke something inside me completely. In the morning, I left a note. Nothing poetic, nothing angry, just the truth. You said she was your best friend. I hope she's enough for the both of you. Then I walked out. No dramatic goodbye, no slamming doors, just the quiet sound of keys on the counter. The last echo of a love story that had already ended. The days after felt unreal. People think heartbreak is loud. Crying, screaming, destruction. But mine was quiet. Like standing in the middle of an empty room and realizing the echo is gone. I stayed at my sister's place for a while. Didn't tell her everything, just enough. She hugged me, said, "You don't deserve this." And I wanted to believe her. But part of me still whispered that maybe I did. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was too emotional. Weeks passed before I checked social media again. And that's when I saw it. A photo of him and Lena, smiling, standing close, their hands almost touching. The caption read, "True friendship never fades." Friendship. The word that started it all. The word that destroyed everything. I stared at that picture for a long time. Not with anger, not even sadness. Just emptiness, like my heart had already moved out of my body. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I breathed, fully, deeply. And for the first time, I didn't feel suffocated by his memory. It's strange how pain can purify you, strip you down until all that's left is truth. I learned that closure doesn't always come from apologies or explanations. Sometimes it comes from finally accepting what's gone. A few weeks later, he called. His voice sounded softer, older. He said, "I miss you." I paused, let the silence hang, and replied, "Do you miss me? Or the version of me that loved you no matter what?" He didn't answer. And that silence, again, was enough. I hung up, blocked his number, and cried one last time. Not for him, but for the woman I used to be. The one who thought love could fix everything. Because love doesn't fix what's built on lies. It only delays the breaking, and ours had already broken long before I found the courage to leave. They say time heals, but they never tell you how long it takes for the bleeding to stop. Some wounds don't close, they just become quieter. After I hung up that last call, I felt empty. Not broken, not angry, just done. It's strange, isn't it? You spend years loving someone so deeply that when it ends, you expect the world to fall apart. But instead, it's silent, peaceful even. Maybe that's what healing really feels like. Not fireworks, not revenge, not even closure. Just silence that no longer hurts. I moved to a small apartment downtown, a place where no one knew my name. The walls were bare. The air smelled like paint and new beginnings. For the first time in years, I slept without waiting for footsteps at the door. And every morning, sunlight would spill across the floor, and I'd whisper to myself, "You're okay. You're finally okay." It wasn't always true, but it was enough to start believing. Sometimes I'd still catch myself reaching for my phone, out of habit, to check if he'd texted or to see what they were posting. But then I'd stop, because I realized I didn't need to know anymore. What they had, what they became. It wasn't my story to follow. Mine had already ended, and in that ending, I found my freedom. Months passed. Life became quieter, softer. I started reading, again walking in parks, drinking my coffee slowly instead of rushing to make 2 cups. I filled the silence with music, with laughter, with people who actually listened. And little by little, I began to find myself again. The version of me that existed before the heartbreak, before the lies. One evening, I got an unexpected message. From Lena. Her name flashing on my screen felt surreal. Like seeing a ghost from another life. It was a single sentence. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of hatred, but out of disbelief. Because I didn't expect it. Not from her, not after everything. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because sometimes silence is the only response that carries weight. Forgiveness isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to carry the pain anymore. A few days later, I heard through mutual friends that their relationship didn't last. Apparently, Daniel started acting distant again, checking his phone late at night, coming home tired, distracted. It hit me then. He hadn't changed. He just changed who he did it to. And for the first time, I didn't feel pity or anger. I felt nothing at all. Because he was no longer mine to understand. One rainy night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights blur through the glass. The same kind of rain that had once hidden my tears now felt. Cleansing. And I whispered to the empty room. Thank you, Lena. Not sarcastically. Not bitterly. But truly. Because if she hadn't come into our lives, I might still be living in that quiet misery, mistaking habit for love. She didn't steal him. She revealed him. And maybe that was the closure I never knew I needed. A year later, I saw him again, purely by accident. At a bookstore we used to visit. He looked older, tired, a bit lost. He saw me too. Our eyes met across the aisle. And for a moment, I could see the memories flicker behind his tired smile. He walked over, said my name softly. You look happy. I smiled. A small, honest smile. I am. There was nothing else to say. No anger. No tears. Just two people who once loved each other, standing in the ruins of what used to be home. He nodded, eyes glassy, and said, You were always the best thing that ever happened to me. And maybe once upon a time, that would have meant everything. But now, it was just words. Too late, too distant. I simply said, Take care, Daniel, and walked away. As I stepped outside, the cold wind brushed against my face, sharp, but freeing. And I realized something. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without pain. I went home, lit a candle, and opened my journal. I wrote the final line to my story. He called her his best friend. I called her the reason our marriage ended. But now, I just call her a lesson. Then I closed the book, blew out the candle, and smiled. Because for the first time in years, the story wasn't about him. It was about me.